All right. Welcome to How to Save Your Marriage Before It's Too Late. Had just a slight technical delay. Hopefully it records all right. Just what happens when updates come. So we'll just work through it, and a couple people might be joining us throughout the meeting. And if you have a question, raise your hand, but we'll get to that. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. And we're going to learn the three core elements of what I have called relationship remodeling to help stop the pain and restore the joy and love to your relationship. So you are in the right place tonight. If you're married and you're starting to think about or even talk about breaking up or getting a divorce, but you really don't want that. Maybe you or your spouse has already decided to separate and you're trying to prevent getting divorced. Or your spouse has filed for divorce but is willing to reconsider, or maybe you have. Or if you or your spouse have been arguing a lot, or the arguments are escalating, maybe even to violence, and you're worried that the only way to end is divorce. This is the right talk for you, and I'm glad that you're here. So who is talking? I'm Dr. JOYLYN Maniaci. I'm a doctor of naturopathic medicine and a certified yoga life coach. That's what those letters mean. I'm a creatrix. I'm the founder and director of the Happiness Clinic. I'm a relationship alchemist. I specialize in relationship dynamics and communication. I'm also a happiness facilitator, so I make sustainable relationships and happiness easier to come by, facilitating, making it easier. And I am a person with lived experience, a lot of work in relationships. So that's me, and thank you for joining me. What we're going to learn today is how to get your partner to start listening to you and to keep listening to you without being pushy or nagging. We're going to get the instant relationship reframe technique that quickly brings positivity back into your marriage, not just for you, but for him too. The fast and proven way to reestablish broken or damaged trust, even when they or you have lied or cheated. So before we get started though, I just want to let you know that yes, everything I'm about to teach you is proven to work. Yes, I have a program where I work one-on-one with women to help them save their marriages, and I would love to have the opportunity to help you too if it's a good fit. So at the end, I'm going to tell you how you can book a free consultation so that we can discuss your situation and make sure we're a good fit before moving forward. And yes, it's totally okay if you don't contact me. I won't hassle you any further. If you've got a question, please ask. Just type it in the chat box, and I will be happy to get to that. So don't hesitate. It's the quickest, fastest, easiest way to get the information you're looking for. I'm also inviting you to join my group, Relationship Real Talk with Dr. JOYLYN Maniaci. And every week we do on Wednesdays at noon a power hour where, again, you have the ability to email or put your questions into the group, and then I'll talk about those during that hour. So you get access to a relationship coach in between your individual sessions. For those in the 90-day relationship remodel program, and for those just kind of dipping your toes in the water and wanting a little bit more resourcing, that time's for you. So I invite you to join us. So let's get started. How to get your partner to start listening and keep listening without being pushy or nagging. In fact, he won't even know you're doing it. So here's what you've probably tried or are working on that is not working, hasn't worked. Asking more frequently or more forcefully. Expressing irritation or anger when you have to ask for things that are obvious or when he doesn't do what you just asked. Justifying your request. Telling him how you feel so that he knows how he's affecting you. Or only asking for small things, or just giving up altogether. So why that's not working, and why that will never work, is when you ask more frequently or more forcefully, that sets the wrong tone. It's what Dr. John Gottman at the Love Lab at the UW in Seattle calls harsh startup. You almost create a hurdle, an obstacle, or a very hostile environment in which to talk. So it totally sets the wrong tone, not one of cooperation. When you express irritation or anger, when you have to ask for things that are obvious, you actually set yourself up for failure and disappointment. That's because that's what expectations really do. They kill joy and contribution. And let me tell you, what is obvious to you, ladies, is not obvious to him. We have had very different culture and gender training as we've grown up. So we've been taught and entrained to pay attention to different things. So what is obvious to you is not obvious to him, even if you've said it over and over. That's because also a lot of us are not actually strong auditory processors. So what you think is obvious isn't actually, and because you have an expectation that the obvious will be taken care of, you kind of just set yourself up to be disappointed and frustrated. If you're expressing irritation and anger when he doesn't do what you asked, you've actually moved out of requesting and gone into demanding. And that decreases cooperation and increases resistance. The reason for that is one of our basic human needs is autonomy. We have to feel like we are in charge of our own lives. So that power dynamics where one is trying to dominate or have authority over the other, especially in a relationship like an intimate, loving relationship that is supposed to be equal, will create a big resistance to that. So that will automatically decrease the cooperation because he's going to be fighting against you instead of wanting to work with you. If you are telling him how you feel so that he knows how he's affecting you, you're actually confusing the issue and diluting the request, making your actual request unclear with all this extra information. Men actually want to contribute to you. There are actually kind men, and there's a good chance that you're with a kind man that actually wants to contribute to you, but he doesn't actually know what it is that you like. When you put a lot of feelings in front, there's a possibility that it might be a harsh startup and a harsh tone, but it's also just a lot of extra information, and he doesn't know if he is supposed to fix the feelings or if there's actual direct request for a task to be done. And if there's too much, the human attention span is short, and it might actually just not last as long as it takes to actually get to the request. If you are only asking for small things or just giving up altogether, you're actually assuming non-compliance, and that diminishes confidence and trust. It's actually an investment in martyrdom and can even sort of lead to contempt. So those are two very starting insidious, but then can become quite blatant and damaging in our relationships. So what to do instead then? Sweeten the tart is what I call it. And that is to get clear on what you're asking for. What is the outcome you are actually desiring? Then, call him by name. If you call him by name, it automatically humanizes him. It is like music to our ears, and we feel seen as a person and not an object. You can also use a pet name that is likely to elicit cooperation. So if your pet names have a tinge of sarcasm or any kind of insult or diminutive property to it, that won't work. It has to be something that will elicit cooperation, like lovers or partner or teammate or friend or hero or stud, something that will actually get him to want to help you. Then, because you're clear on the outcome that you would like to have, now you know what request to make, and you just make that request. You can tell him how it will contribute and make your life easier, because that is actually what he would like to do for you. But then stop there. Keep it simple, sweetheart. Don't put in the extra information about your feelings. You actually don't need to justify the request, because there is no reason that you can't ask or shouldn't be able to ask your partner for help. One of the harsh startup things, I forgot to mention this, is also there is a female communication pattern, which is the tendency to justify or validate a request. That kind of goes like, I've done so many loads of laundry. I've just gotten back from taking him to soccer practice, and the litter box needs to be emptied, and nobody's going to help me with dinner. And so that sets you up to be able to say, can you help me with dinner? But really, it's trying to make a list of all the reasons that it's even okay for you to ask in the first place. And the tone of that is already frustrated and harsh. So you have a lot of variables working against you there. So keep it simple. Then say thank you if and when he fills the request. That is very important. So get clear on what it is you're asking for. Call him by name, make your request, and then say thank you when he fulfills it. Here is why this works. You're immediately softening the tone because you're not leading with any negative emotions or justification. You're simplifying the communication. The request is going to be clear, and it's not going to get lost in a lot of extra words or talk about feelings. It's going to decrease resistance and defensiveness because it's going to remain a request and not become a demand. It works so that you'll actually be encouraged to continue to do it. And then when you say thank you, what you appreciate appreciates. He is going to be so happy to be seen as a contribution to your life that he's going to actually be rewarded for doing that and then want to continue to do that. It actually is a positive feedback loop that works. So sweeten the tart. Feel heard. Feel appreciated. Be a team together. So here is a question that came up to me after I gave this talk earlier, a couple of weeks ago, is why is it always up to the woman to do this? And the short answer is it isn't. There are no hard and fast rules in that it's the woman that has to change the communication. However, there are a great many of us who are sensitive, empathic, and born leaders. And so because we are the ones that know we'd like something different and can see the possibilities for it, we're put in the leadership role, so we have to take the first step. But it's less of any kind of should, or even that you have to, but this is something that you can do, and things will change if you do. So I just encourage you to play with it and try it out. How do I know what to call him or her? Like I said, a pet name that will elicit cooperation, or use their name. Our name, when people speak our name, it's like music to our ears, and they instantly have our attention because it humanizes us and puts us on a level playing field. And what's different about this is the elegance. It is simple and it is effective. It really does work. And I used to tell a story about this, about how one day I was getting ready for work and irritated that he was in bed still, and I wanted coffee and didn't have enough time. And I just, instead of getting frustrated, which I think I had just the week before, but then I reread the blog that I wrote about this, and I was like, I'm going to try this and do this different. And I just laid on top of him and I said, lover, would you make me coffee? And he turned and looked at me and said, I'd love to. And he was out of bed in less than 30 seconds. And I had a hot cup of coffee and a kiss to see me on my way to work. And it was fantastic. And that actually blew me away because it was so simple. I had also a practiced habit of grumbling and mumbling, and it's so obvious that I'm getting ready for work and it would be nice gesture for him to do this, and setting myself up and you know, kind of getting myself amped and irritated. And I did it different and it worked. And it continues to work. Just the other day, because sometimes you can ask for emotional support if that's what you need, and there's nothing wrong, because what might seem obvious may not be obvious. But I was working through some tough stuff that was coming up in my life, and I just said, "Can I have a hug, Pete?" And it was funny because I could actually see the confusion, because he was actually fixing our furnace at the same time, and he knew that both of them needed to happen, and that being there for me emotionally was actually going to delay the furnace work. But he just gave me a hug, and for someone who is not super emotional, actually said some of the sweetest words that really helped comfort my heart that day. So this really, really does work, and allows for a lot more connection and intimacy between you two if you continue to use it. Alrighty. So the instant relationship reframe technique that quickly brings positivity back into your marriage and more ease into your life. Let's have it. So again, what you've probably tried that didn't work is talking about what you don't like, what you don't want, what you don't have, or what you would like to avoid. Trying to fix what isn't working. Trying to prevent the reoccurrence of a past failure or heartbreak. Getting clear on what he needs to fix or change. Or possibly assuming innocence or powerlessness, that your hands are tied. So why that's not working, and why that will never work, is when you talk about what you don't like, what you don't want, don't have, or what you would like to avoid or prevent the occurrence of, you actually put all your focus on the past. Now, just in driving, you know that if you keep your gaze at that rearview mirror, you're going to drive off the side of the road or crash into something. And it is the same way when we're living our life. If we're constantly looking at what we don't have or trying to prevent something from the past, that's where all our energy goes. Because the thing is, what we don't like, what we don't want, what we don't have, even though it seems like it's in the present, it's all a product of past choices and thoughts and decisions and actions that we've taken. So that if we focus on what's not there, it's past focused. Hard to create a future and something creative and new when everything is being referenced from the past. Also, when you're talking about what you don't like, what you don't want, what you don't have, or what you would like to avoid, you actually undermine your confidence. Because we are always in conversation and communication with our subconscious, and it's recording what we're saying. So that when we talk about what we don't like and don't have and what we don't want, we're actually, again, energizing those things. But also, when we talk negatively about our partner, or about things that we so strongly want to avoid, we empower the fear of those things. Or we tell ourselves that maybe we don't deserve a good partner, or maybe, we've had self-doubt that we're not good enough. And so that's the reason this partner is there. Our subconscious will link together what we're saying with old habits, and it kind of weaves them together into one tapestry of a coherent story that often actually isn't accurate. But that will undermine our confidence. Now, when you're trying to fix what isn't working, you are problem focused. And I did this for a long time in my relationship, because that's how our reality is set. If there's something wrong, you study it, and then you fix it, and then it works, and things will get better. But what actually happens is you're constantly focusing on a problem, so there's not a lot of enjoyment going on. And then, because there's a problem focus, more things pop up to fix. That's part of our creative power and how our subconscious actually works against us sometimes. Where our focus and attention goes, our energy flows and energizes those things. So that if we focus on problems, we energize problems, and more of them will pop up. Now, if you are getting clear on what he needs to fix or change, or perhaps to you it is so obvious, what you're actually doing is creating antagonism and opposition, because this creates a you versus me. You become very separate and you're no longer working together towards a common solution. You're saying, you need to do this. It's also avoiding responsibility and diminishing your own power and contribution, both to the problem and the solution. And just like that, if you're assuming innocence or powerlessness, saying because it's all him and he's the one that needs to fix it, I can't do anything, you're avoiding responsibility and diminishing your own power and contribution to the problem. Because I don't believe that things are always split equally, but there are ways that everything is a contribution. Both people are contributing to this dynamic. And it's not about fault. It's about recognizing what you're contributing so that you can change that and change the whole dynamic. And that's both to, once you see what you're doing that might be feeding the problem, you can stop feeding the problem. And that is part of the solution. It's also just about being honest and responsible, but that actually gives you, puts you in a position of power, because then there's something you can actually do. So what you can do instead is the relationship reframe. And that is to talk about things that are going well that make you feel good. And when I say feel good, I want you to use your body as a tool. It's not about feeling right or superior. It's about feeling good, which in your body will be a sense of ease and relaxation. You might see the corners of your mouth turn up, your shoulders drop. That's how you're going to know you're actually feeling good. Your posture improves, you're walking taller, you're breathing easier. It's not about being hard and rigid and right. Those are two different things, but sometimes we actually confuse them. And we've made a habit about talking about our problems and connecting to people on our problems. So that this is very fundamentally different, is to talk about things that are going well, changing the content that you're talking about. Talk about the future that you'd like to have instead of the past that needs to heal, or that you'd like to avoid or have to fix before you can move on. When you just start changing your focus to the future, you energize the future and more creative energy goes in that direction, and you start moving forward and getting out of a rut. Also, talk about your partner in a way that exalts you. When you compliment your partner, you also compliment yourself. When you insult your partner, you also sort of insult yourself, and in subtle ways say, I don't deserve a good partner, or I don't have good taste in partners. I made a poor choice here. But if you talk about your partner in a way that exalts you, then you get to be lucky in love. And they will also feel appreciated that you are recognizing their positive attributes and contributions. Use I messages. This is a very simple communication technique, simple, but very, very profound as far as when we get into this negative talk and these disempowering language patterns, we tend to start a lot of sentences with you. You know what your problem is? You need to do this. And instead, if we can say I and actually get clearer on what it is that we are thinking or feeling, or just like the last time, what it is we'd actually like as an outcome, so we could actually clearly request, or to just say, this is what I'm feeling, it brings a lot of barriers down so that you're actually more vulnerable and much, much easier to connect with, because there's not a barrier there, there's not a lot of defense there, and there's not a lot of threat there anymore either. There's not this accusation, you know, like accusations are kind of like swords pointed at your partner. When you're not using those, they don't have such a need to keep their defenses up either, and you can connect and have so much more intimacy and clear communication then. And say thank you more often. Say thank you for everything that you notice. It might sound stupid. You might feel like, oh, this is such elementary, it's so dumb. But we've just actually stopped saying thank you when people actually do things for us. And it so that a lot of people's contributions go unnoticed and everybody starts to feel unappreciated and then distant from their partner because they no longer feel seen or their contribution no longer recognized. So start saying thank you more often. Here's why this works. It's shifting the focus away from the past, away from problems, and it's prioritizing the future and recognizing the blessings, the contributions, and the solutions that are right in front of you and available. It changes the message and the conversation that you're having with your subconscious about who you are, what you deserve, and what it is you're actually looking for. So if you're no longer talking about and kind of looking for how things can go wrong, and you start talking about what's going well and the future you'd like to have, you start looking for more of those. There will be more clarity on you, on your thoughts, and on your feelings, and this encourages vulnerability, and vulnerability is the key to connection and intimacy. Gratitude here is the alchemizer. What you appreciate appreciates, so that when they do something nice for you, if you say thank you, you're much more likely to get more of that. And that's true for everything. But gratitude is also so great because it actually has been shown to change your brain. Your brain physiologically starts to remodel. Gratitude actually changes the synaptic and electrical patterns that are happening in your brain, so that when you have gratitude, there is a flow and a chemistry that changes your body chemistry. And then the more gratitude you feel, you start to make those synaptic patterns used more, get pruned to be faster, so that it actually becomes easier to have gratitude and recognize things to be grateful for. It's actually very amazing. And then it works because you're getting positive attention for fresh content and a positive attitude. Affection from your partner because you're recognizing their contribution and actually paying more attention to their positive traits. That's probably what got you to fall in love with each other in the first place. So it works. Empowering language. Feel good about your relationship and be happy with your partner. So what if you need to vent? They have brought something old, you're just in it, and things just went sour and you've got to get it off your chest. What about venting? Venting and complaining look very similar, and the content of the message will be very similar. The difference is the energy and how things change when and after you tell the story. When you are venting, you are actually doing just that. You are actually venting and discharging and allowing the energy and the intensity of the emotional situation to dissipate. And this is usually done in the company of a safe place and a safe person who can hear you out. When we're complaining, we often tell the story, and the emotional intensity or the rapidity, the quickness of the spin are amplified. So that when we tell the story, we're actually re-triggering ourselves and getting mad all over again. So it's just, you have to pay attention to what the purpose of your telling the story is, and then what's actually happening as you're telling the story. If you feel yourself getting amped up and re-triggered, you have to stop. It's not venting, and it's not helping change the situation. Venting, you'll feel yourself start to calm down a little bit. And you might have to tell the story twice. 3 times is max, 4th time is an indulgence. That is a gift from a mentor I had many years ago, but I found that to be true. And actually, if I probably paid attention, I probably would have recognized that I was telling my story and amping myself up which is why I had to keep telling my story so many times. So just pay attention. Now, if you feel like you're lying when you're talking about things that are going well or that the good things about your partner, it's actually your habit and that is telling you that makes you feel like it's lying. But it's actually your habit that is lying, because there is no situation that is all one way, that's all good or all bad. So that both are always there. You just get to choose which one you're going to focus on and talk about. And if you feel like you're lying, it's because it's just not been rehearsed and practiced as many times as the other one, so it feels unnatural at first. And then you don't actually ever have to say anything that isn't true. Start with what you can notice. Start looking for things to have gratitude for, to compliment on, to say thank you for. And start with things that maybe don't have anything to do with you, like he looks good in blue, or he's really good with the kids or something. But there is something there. And also say nice things about you too. You're not all one way. You are enough. You are beautiful. And there are good things that you can start talking about yourself and the dreams that you have about your future that you can start talking about. And what is so different about this is actually fundamentally changing the communication we have with our subconscious, the way our brains are functioning, and the physiological patterning of them. And it works, simply. And yes, it will really work. I will tell you about a client that I had, and our first session was a little bit hilarious because in a matter of 5 to 10 minutes, I knew everything that he was doing wrong and that he needed to fix. It was so obvious that he was the problem, yet he was not the one on the phone. So I said, okay, let's start with what we've got, which is you on the phone. And all she did for the first week or two, I think it was 2 weeks, was just build awareness about her language and notice how many sentences she started with you and how often she used the word should. And the first week she was like, I can't believe it. That I didn't know I used those words so often. So then we went and did some work on how to rephrase things. She definitely wanted to work on vulnerability. So talking about the I messages worked into that really well. And a lot of what the nagging was really, she cared. She was very caring and wanted him to take better care of himself so he could be around and they could be together for longer. It just wasn't coming out that way. There's a lot of that harsh startup and starting with yous. But when she changed that, it wasn't even a month, later. I mean, it was a short amount of time. And our session was, and she said, you wouldn't believe it. He just asked me for the number for my eye doctor. She's like, I have been bugging him for months about getting checkups and how he needed them. And it's always been a fight, and I haven't said anything, and he's asking me about it. So with only focusing on her language and her attitude and getting clear on what it is she wanted and how she was approaching him and talking to him and about him, changed the entire dynamic of the relationship. And all of a sudden, the changes she had been pushing for were showing up with total ease. So it really can be quite magical. All right, the fast and proven way then to reestablish broken or damaged trust, even in the most difficult situations, again, has a lot to do with our communication. So here's what you may have tried that didn't work. Talking about the situation or the problem, or asking to talk about the situation. Badgering, arguing, yelling, or making threats. Holding things in, not talking, stonewalling, or leaving. Maybe crying or throwing things or in some way expressing your feelings when you don't feel heard or that he isn't listening. Threatening or attempting self-harm or harming another. And listening to respond or listening so that he will listen to you. Those things don't work. and they will never work. And here's why. When you say, "Can we talk?" you have just triggered the escape reflex in men. Men hate the words, "Can we talk?" So that continuing to pursue makes him feel chased, but not in a good way, and he wants to run away. So it's hard to bridge the communication gap when he's trying to make that gap as wide as possible. Badgering, arguing, yelling, and making threats doesn't work. Who yells the loudest is often the least likely to be heard, just because there's such harshness, a bit of violence and disrespect in that manner of communication. And it's also a triggering behavior that can elicit a trauma reaction in the recipient. So, depending on if it's you that's badgering, arguing, yelling, or if they are doing this to you, what happens for a lot of the person that's on the receiving end of that is that's triggering. Somewhere in their childhood, that created a very intense feeling of insecurity, of being unsafe. And when we have feelings like that are so overwhelming, that's where trauma sets in, is the inability to manage the emotional landscape at the time. And so this behavior can actually start triggering them. Now, the thing about trauma is when it's triggered and then we react from that place, we react at the emotional age that trauma reaction was set in, when that little trigger was installed there. So that we can't have access to our creativity, to our awareness, even to our adult logical brain very well, because we are at the age where we're feeling very unsafe and unable to manage our emotions. Now, if we hold things in, we refuse to talk about them, stonewall, and totally turn our backs or just leave, that communicates mistrust and contempt. Say, "I'm not even going to communicate with you." But this also, even though it is quieter, can also elicit trauma, because if anyone has any sense of fear of abandonment or actual experience of being abandoned, even if they were 5 years old in a mall and it was 10 minutes and their parents were only steps away, for a small child, that can be very alarming. And if that is what gets triggered by you, or if it's you that's getting triggered by them turning their back and just walking away, that's also a trauma response and can be triggering. So it doesn't work. Crying, throwing things, dramatically expressing feelings when you don't feel heard, any kind of threat or attempt to harm you or anyone else, that's manipulating and controlling pattern. That will create a power dynamic, a differential in power. And like just when you became, if you've been demanding instead of requesting, that will create defensiveness and resistance automatically. So they do not foster effective communication that way. If you are the one doing this, or if it's your partner that is doing this, please know that these behaviors are also responses to trauma. It's an attempt to control something for a time when you felt totally out of control. So have a compassion and some gentleness with yourself. It's not your fault. It's just that these patterns don't actually work. They're not facilitating communication, so that whatever issue needs to be resolved is not going to be resolved. So just know that if you're doing them, they're not working. It's time to find something else. But it's not about judging you or them for doing this. If you're listening to respond, or listening so that he will listen to you, that is a gift with strings attached, and that will create resentment and mistrust. We've all had enough marketing in our lives where free gift, yeah, right. What's your ulterior motive? And if you actually have one, your trust is blown, and then you have a giant mess to clean up if you can actually ever bridge that trust. So do not give gifts with strings attached. It doesn't go over well. And listening is one of those. So what do you do instead? And that is to listen without strings attached. And here's how. Be quiet. You can't listen if you're talking. Be open. You don't assume you know what they're going to say. You have to be open and willing to receive whatever it is that they have to say. Then be quiet some more. It's okay if you don't have an immediate response. It's actually a good thing because then you're not on autopilot. This space, this awkward silence can be uncomfortable, but it's actually a sign of growth and space for growth to happen. If you're listening, don't rush them. It's also okay if they don't have an immediate response either. This might be the first time where they've actually had someone ask them a question and be willing to listen to them. They also might at first be a little mistrusting, wondering if there's an ulterior motive and not sure if they're going to open up. Give them space because that will help build the trust. Be honest. If you're not really able to listen at the time, remember, we've been hurting each other with how we've been miscommunicating and the baggage that we brought into this. And perhaps this issue is still very emotionally charged and you're still hurting. That's okay. So say that though. Let them know that you would like to listen. You want to be there for them in this way, but you have a lot of emotional turmoil and you just need a little bit of space and time. That is being honest. And that will also help, even if it postpones the conversation, will still help build the trust. But what I would like you to notice here, though, is that several of the things that we talked about that wasn't working, the emotional displays, the triggering, the talking, the yelling, the arguing, badgering, even the not talking, walking away, leaving, those things are trauma responses. You might also have this. And so if you're doing these things, especially the ones that are louder, just by virtue of the volume can actually trigger yourself. Or maybe you're the one receiving this and you're getting triggered too. So that the way to heal trauma is to have a safe witness, and you can actually do this for yourself somewhat. So you can be a resource for your own healing. So offer yourself the gift of listening. That means take some time and be quiet, where you're not just talking about your feelings, about what you think the feelings are about, how you're going to go ahead, what you're going to do so that you don't feel this anymore. Just stop talking and be quiet with yourself and let the pain tell you what it needs. Don't assume that your story and your feelings are true. Actually be willing to listen, because when we're talking about trauma and we're going back to that age, that means there's like this hurt little kid inside who wants to speak. And if you're quiet and you sit with them, you can actually hear what it is they need. We always think that it's going to take years and years of therapy, but sometimes it's going to be you embodying them and giving them a voice and saying, I'm okay. No, you can't do this to me. It's not fair, whatever. But sometimes it actually is simple, but you can be the listener and give the gift of listening to yourself as well. And that will help dissipate some of the emotional charge so that you are able to listen to your partner better. Just want to throw that out there. So here's why listening works to build trust. First of all, you're going to get their attention. A lot of can we talk all this? We've kind of gotten in a rut of needs to be talked about, elephant in the room, not going to talk about it, don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable to talk about. And we kind of get in that. But when you really listen, you get attention because you're interrupting a pattern without any negative or abusive behavior that's going to trigger it and make it blow up again. Whenever there is space or silence where there normally isn't, you will get the attention of your subconscious and of your partner's self-conscious. So know that silence, even though it is not socially rewarded, we all talk about the awkward silence, it actually is very powerful. You can quickly correct miscommunication, inaccurate assumptions, and gain awareness and understanding of a situation, of your emotional and their emotional landscape and experience, just by communicating effectively and listening without assuming you know what they're going to say. You can stop this cycle of trauma and triggering and reaction and pain. You can de-escalate the intensity of the situation and open the door to a different outcome with listening. And then these gifts without strings attached. Oh, sorry. It's my phone. When there is an absence of an ulterior motive and someone recognizes you just want to be with them and hear what's going on for them and understand what's going on, that is a real gift, and it will bridge gaps. And then if we're honest about when we can't be there and we show them that we'd like to be there, again, more gifts, more trust. And when we don't rush them, we're showing them we're going to give them the space. We're really honestly going to give them the space. That builds trust. And because the trust often, especially if there's been lying or cheating, is just broken down to such a degree, it actually has to start with these little seemingly baby steps, but they do build up, and you can restore trust. And listening, when you actually listen, things change. You're going to hear things differently, and you're going to interrupt subconscious patterns, and you're going to de-escalate and reduce triggering so things can actually change. So if you do something different, you get something different, and then you can enjoy the change, which is more connection and a greater level of trust. So why should I listen then if I'm the one that's not being listened to? Well, we know from earlier that the person who's screaming the loudest is probably the least likely to get heard. So sometimes you could just stop the pattern of you guys trying to scream over each other. And if you actually start listening and bring the volume down, you actually are more likely to be listened to. Also, if you're the one that's feeling like you're not being listened to, it very likely is, at least in part, sometimes in whole, that it's you that's not listening to you. Perhaps you've been repeating the same story so often, or done such a great job at talking about your feelings instead of feeling them, or intellectualizing them instead of feeling them, that there's still an emotional experience that needs to be processed that can be done through listening. But you are the one that needs to listen to you, because you count and you matter, and you actually are the one that you need to communicate and connect with. Now, if you started off well, but then you got mad and interrupted, take a step back, pause. If you interrupted and escalated, you can apologize. I'm sorry, I just saw that I did that. Again, we're rebuilding trust. So every time you show that you have integrity and that you mean that you're really trying to listen, is going to go a long way. And if you need some more time because you are still getting triggered, or it is so much pain that you're having a hard time hearing, take some time for yourself. Honor yourself. Listen to yourself and ask yourself what you need, and then take it. But instead of walking away and turning your back and just saying, I'm out, say, I would like to finish this conversation. I really would like to listen and hear what you have to say. I can just tell that I'm too amped emotionally. It's too charged, and I just need 10 minutes, a half hour, 2 days, whatever it is, but let them know that you're still invested in connecting with them. Now, I say, don't assume that you know what they're going to say, but what do you do if they do say the same thing that they always say? Well, if you're listening and you're actually in the same room, you can be listening to tone. You can be watching their body language so that you can actually reflect and let them know, hey, you're saying this, but the tone is saying this. And you can report your observations. And maybe you will hear what's not being said, and don't ignore it anymore. If you know somebody's hurting, or if you know that you're hurting, you don't have to pretend. And you don't have to make excuses. You don't have to sweep things under the rug. And maybe there is more information present when you actually aren't trying to rush them just so that you can be heard. That there might actually be more information available, even if their words are the same. So I would just encourage you to just practice listening deeper and deeper. And will this really work? Absolutely. There was a time with my husband and I that things were not good. And we would argue a lot. And as maybe you understand, I have no idea what it is we were actually arguing about. We'd have a fight that would last, I don't know, minutes to hours. And I didn't know what we were actually fighting about. And we were having one of those. And, it'd be intense, and then it would start to resolve, and then something would happen and it would start all over again. We had very cyclical arguments, and it was frustrating. But we were about to go to bed, and I don't like going to bed bad, but he doesn't like, if he gets too tired, to talk anymore. So we were at that point, both really frustrated. And I was just like, you know what? Sometimes it helps when I'm like, I'm a coach. I've got to do better than this. I help people with this. Why am I doing so poorly at this? What can I do different? And, working with a lot of the tools of nonviolent communication, I think I tried again with a question. I just tried one more time to just be like, is resolution possible tonight or something? And he replied with something super sarcastic, very snarky, and, like, oh, and it would have been easy to just react to it and blow up, and then we would have been in the same space. And I knew that I would like resolution. Um, so I said, wow, that is a response that comes from somebody who's in a lot of pain, actually. Are you hurting? And his whole body melted, and he actually started to cry, and he said, yeah, I'm hurting really bad. And I was like, I was not expecting that at all. I thought he was really just invested in telling me that I was a jerk or whatever it was that he was fighting so hard for. It really was hurt. But it didn't look like hurt. But I was really surprised. And when somebody's barriers drop so much that their body actually shifts, it's really hard to actually maintain your anger at them. He was being so vulnerable at that point that then I immediately embraced him, and I was like, well, what's hurting you? And it was me. Not in that I had such an investment in my worthlessness that I actually, like I said, don't assume innocence or powerlessness. I was very innocent because I was so worthless that nothing I said would ever matter. So I said things that, not outrightly horrible or name calling or anything like that, but just little barbs and criticisms and things like that. But I thought they were just brushed out because I'm so worthless. Who cares? But he did care. And so my criticisms did reach his heart, and he was hurting. And it was me and my criticism and my avoiding responsibility, and that was actually the cause of that. And that really changed the course of our relationship in a big way, because I actually was like, wow, this whole story that I have about how worthless I am and that nothing that I say matters actually isn't true. So that actually got me curious about what other things I had told myself that may or may not be true, and what other areas of my life I had used that story and run with it, and maybe it wasn't true. And then actually saw that he was hurting the way that I was hurting, and that he didn't feel listened to, and nothing he could say I wouldn't listen to. And that's how I felt. So I knew his pain on a really intimate level, and knowing how bad I felt and how much I wanted to resolve that, I did not want to be the cause of that for someone else. And so it really made me clean up my act. So listening really does work. And now there is such a much higher level of intimacy and trust between us, because I was actually willing to receive what it is he had to say. So it does work. Do you guys have any questions here? We're getting real close to time. So if you don't have one right now, feel free to email me and I can email you back if you've got questions. But here is what we learned today. A quick recap is how to get your partner to listen to you, to keep listening to you without being pushy or nagging. And that's getting clear on what you'd like and then calling him by name. Keep your request simple and say thank you. Show gratitude. The instant relationship reframe technique that quickly brings positivity back into your marriage for both of you is to talk about your partner, your marriage, and your life in a way that lifts you up and cultivate and express gratitude for yourself and for him. The fast and proven way to reestablish broken or damaged trust, even if you or they have lied or cheated, is to listen with no strings attached. Fix the inaccurate, or not fix, correct the inaccurate communication, and don't scare them away by eliciting the escape reflex or triggering any kind of trauma reaction. So that's what happens when you can listen with no strings attached. So what I'd like you to remember from today, if nothing else, is that there is nothing wrong with you. Relationship problems are not evidence that there is something wrong with you or your partner. Relationship problems are just showing you that something isn't working. But you can find what that is, and you have the power to change things. You have 3 very effective and useful tools that you can actually put to work right away, and things will change if you use them. So it's not that you should or you have to, but that you can, and things will change if you do. And it's okay. If you don't know what to say or do next, that's a good thing. It means that you're not on autopilot. And then there's also coaching available so that you don't have to figure it all out on your own. And that's how we can work together to save your marriage. The first step, I told you I was going to talk about this, is the free consultation. And that's just a conversation about what's going on for you to make sure that we're a good match. It's not sales. There's no pressure. We're just going to talk. And then if you choose to move forward, we have an intake appointment. That's your first coaching session that has an in-depth conversation to get clarity on your goals, the future that you'd like to have, the relationship, and the dynamics that you'd like to have as part of your life. And we create an action plan so that you can realize that in the shortest amount of time possible. And then you follow up with 11 weeks of active coaching, and you'll learn your strengths that you've got working for you, and we'll look at the obstacles and how to work around those. We're going to be improving communication, and your confidence is going to increase for sure. And then we're going to celebrate your renewed, strong marriage and increased attention and affection from your partner. That's a biggie. So that's the 90-day relationship remodel and what's available when we work together one-on-one. And I encourage you, I would love to hear from you and to work with you. And so I will have this replay ready, and I'll put the link for you to book your or request your free consultation. And if there's any other questions, feel free to email me or reply to that email I'll send out with the replay. But thank you so much for coming tonight. And I can't wait to talk to you in the future, hopefully real soon. All right, have a good night.